Why did the gym fall silent the moment she stepped inside? No one knew her name. No one cared where she came from. But every man in that room already decided one thing: she didn't belong. The year was 1987. Brooklyn, Murphy's boxing gym, a place where sweat stained the floors, leather snapped like whiplash, and ambition smelled like blood. It wasn't just a gym. It was a sanctuary, a fortress of men. Women didn't walk through that door, and if they did, they didn't last. But Sarah Martinez wasn't like most. For 27 minutes she'd stood outside, clutching her worn canvas bag, staring at the rusted metal door. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From the weight of everything it took to get here. 22 years of survival in a world that told her no at every turn. Foster homes, dead-end jobs, nights wiping down diner counters just to afford this one chance. The noise inside was thunder. Heavy bags booming like cannons, gloves popping against pads, jump ropes whipping concrete, voices sharp and crude. And over all of it, the unspoken law: only the strongest survived. Sarah pushed the door open. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Gloves froze in the air. 100 skeptical eyes tracked her every step. The only sound was a lone fighter in the far corner still pounding the heavy bag, his fists the steady drumbeat of dominance. And then came the voice. "You lost, sweetheart." Tommy, the tank, the heavyweight golden boy, 6'4", 240 pounds of pure arrogance, undefeated, untouchable. A man who made his living off breaking jaws and reminding everyone he was Murphy's prized creation. He smirked, towering over her like a statue carved from menace. "This ain't aerobics class. You want pink weights and mirrors, there's a place down the street." Laughter rippled through the gym, the kind that cuts deeper than words. But Sarah didn't flinch. Her dark eyes that had seen too much pain for her age, locked on his. "I don't want to tone up," she said. "I want to fight." The laughter faltered, the air shifted. Amusement gave way to discomfort because she wasn't smiling. She wasn't joking, she was serious. From the back office, the old man himself emerged. Murphy, 60 years of boxing etched into his weathered face. He scanned her with the precision of a trainer who could read a fighter's soul in seconds. He saw her posture, her steady gaze, the set of her jaw. He didn't dismiss her, not yet. "What's the commotion?" he asked, though he already knew. Tommy puffed up his chest, eager for the spotlight. "This girl thinks she wants to box. I was just explaining that women don't belong here." The words hung heavy. Women don't belong here. A sentence Sarah had heard too many times in too many ways. From her stepfather, who said she'd never amount to anything. From teachers who told her to shrink her dreams. From bosses who thought she should smile more and want less. This time the words didn't just sting. They ignited. She set her bag down, slow, deliberate. "Is that so?" Tommy grinned, feeding on the attention. "That's right, sweetheart. This is a man's world. Always has been, always will be. You want to fight. Watch it on TV like every other broad." The gym was holding its breath. Some leaning forward, eager for a spectacle. Others shifting uncomfortably, knowing Tommy's cruelty wasn't just words, it was bait. Sarah's fists curled, not because she planned it, because instinct told her she might need them. Murphy's pale blue eyes narrowed. He'd seen enough fights to know when one was about to erupt. And then it happened. Tommy stepped closer, towering, his stale breath hot as he leaned down. He reached out not to strike, not yet, but to pat her on the head, like she was a child, a lost puppy. "Why don't you run home before you get hurt?" His hand never made contact. What came next shattered more than his jaw. Sarah's right cross exploded like it had been waiting her whole life. From her planted back foot, through her hips, up her arm, into her fist, 22 years of rejection, anger, resilience all snapping forward in a perfect arc of violence. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Tommy's head whipped back, his feet left the ground. His body slammed into the lockers with a metallic crash that echoed like church bells. And then silence. Silence except for the ringing steel, except for the stunned gasps, except for the drip of blood trickling from his split lip. Murphy didn't move. He just watched. He knew that wasn't luck. That was timing, precision, power, natural-born talent. Chaos erupted. Fighters swarmed. Shouts for ice, for a doctor, for help. But Sarah stood still. Her hand throbbed, but her body was coiled, ready. She hadn't come here to start a war. That punch wasn't planned. It was instinct. Muscle memory carved from years of defending herself in foster homes where backing down meant you didn't eat. And yet, as she looked at Tommy's broken frame slumped against the lockers, something new washed over her. Satisfaction. Not just for the punch, but for what it meant. She'd proved something. To him, to them, to herself. Jesus Christ, one of the fighters whispered. She dropped Tank with one punch. Murphy crouched beside Tommy, checking the damage. The jaw was gone. Surgery, metal plates, months of recovery. His undefeated record intact, but his reputation shattered. Sarah turned to leave. The crowd parted as if she carried fire, respect from some, hostility from others, but none dared stop her. Murphy caught her at the door. "Where do you think you're going?" "Home," she said. "I figure I'm not welcome here anymore." What she expected was anger, threats, maybe even police. What she didn't expect was a thin smile tugging at the old trainer's lips. "That was either the thing I've ever seen," he said, "or the most impressive. I'm still deciding which." "Does it matter?" she asked. "Your boy made it clear how you all feel." Murphy's voice cut sharp. "Tommy's not my boy. He's an arrogant punk who just learned a very expensive lesson about respect. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" She frowned, not following. "You just knocked out an undefeated heavyweight with one punch. You think that kind of talent should go to waste. You're offering to train me. I'm offering to see what you're made of. That punch tells me you've got power. But boxing isn't about one shot. It's about strategy, endurance, respect. Can you take punishment and come back for more? Can you learn when every bone in your body tells you to quit?" She thought about all the times she'd been told no. All the nights she'd walked home from the diner with just enough tips to keep the lights on. All the dreams she'd buried because someone else decided her worth. "What makes you think I can do this?" Murphy's smile widened. "Because you just did. The question is, can you do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, for 10 years straight?" Her hand still ached. Her life had just changed. But Sarah extended it anyway. The same hand that had broken a jaw and shattered assumptions. "When do we start?" Murphy's grip was strong, calloused by 40 years of shaping fighters. "Tomorrow," he said. The next morning, she arrived at dawn. Murphy was already there, coffee in hand, staring at the sunrise through grimy windows. "You're 10 minutes late," he said without turning. "Late for what? We never set a time." "If you want to be a fighter, you're here before dawn. No exceptions. The work starts when everyone else is sleeping. That's rule number 1. Want to hear the others?" Sarah dropped her bag, the same spot where she'd stood the day before. Murphy turned, eyes hard. "Rule number 2, leave your ego at the door. Yesterday you threw one good punch. That doesn't make you a boxer. A carpenter doesn't swing a hammer once and call himself a master." She nodded, swallowing her pride. "Rule number 3, he said, tossing her an old jump rope and a pair of gloves. "You train like your life depends on it, because in this sport, sometimes it does." The gym looked different in morning light. Less intimidating, more like a workshop. A place to build, not destroy, but every stair still burned. Whispers followed her every step. Some hoped she'd quit, others hoped she'd stay. She ignored them. Murphy put her to work. Fundamentals, footwork, balance, stance. 1,000 tiny details that felt boring compared to yesterday's violence. "This is boring," she complained. "Good," Murphy said. "If you're bored, it means you're learning. Flash looks good in movies. Fights are won by those who master the basics so deeply they become instinct." As the morning wore on, fighters trickled in. The whispers grew louder. Some sneered, some smirked, but Sarah focused. She wrapped her hands, she shadowboxed. She learned to move her feet. Murphy's words cut through the noise. "Half of them hope you fail so they can say women don't belong here. The other half hope you succeed so they can brag about training with you. Either way, their opinions don't matter. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself. Outside, a small crowd gathered at the windows. Word had spread. The waitress who broke a heavyweight's jaw, reporters, neighbors, curious faces pressed to glass. Murphy pulled her aside. Fame is fast. Yesterday you were nobody. Today everyone wants a piece. Tomorrow you'll be nobody again if you're not careful, but skill lasts forever. So forget the noise, focus on the work. She nodded. She understood. For the first time in her life, she understood. The real fight wasn't against Tommy. It wasn't even against the whispers, or the crowds, or the headlines already writing her story. The real fight was against herself. And Sarah Martinez had just begun round 1. Why did the punches sound so different when she threw them? Every time Sarah's glove snapped against the bag, it echoed flat, uncertain, unfinished. The men's punches boomed like cannons. Hers sounded like someone knocking timidly at a locked door. And that's exactly how she felt. 3 weeks into training, her body ached in places she didn't know existed. Her hands were raw despite the wraps. Her legs, strong from years waiting tables and hustling double shifts, wobbled after every drill. And every morning Murphy demanded the same thing: road work at dawn. Miles of running through Brooklyn's cracked sidewalks while the city still slept. This isn't about speed, he told her once as she stumbled back into the gym, lungs burning. It's about discipline, about showing up, every day, no excuses. But discipline didn't make it easier when the eyes of the gym stayed glued on her. Some stared with quiet resentment, others with cruel amusement. Whispers followed her across the floor. She's just a gimmick. That punch on Tank was a fluke. She'll quit before summer. And some nights, she almost believed them. But every morning, she came back. Murphy's lessons weren't gentle. They were relentless. Footwork until her calves screamed. Jump rope until her shins burned. Hours shadowboxing in front of cracked mirrors, trying to make her movements fluid, sharp, efficient. Keep your hands up. Chin tucked. You're dropping your shoulder again. Every correction felt like a hammer pounding away at her confidence, but she absorbed them. Slowly, piece by piece, the chaos inside her body began to find rhythm. Still, there were moments she wanted to quit, like the day she tried the speed bag for the first time. Her fists slapped against it clumsily, the rhythm collapsing every 2 seconds. Laughter echoed from across the gym. Tommy's old friends, the ones who still hadn't forgiven her for humiliating him. Looks like Tank's jaw isn't the only thing she broke. She broke the damn bag too. Murphy shut them down with a single glare, but Sarah heard it. She always heard it. That night, she sat in her apartment, hands swollen, knuckles split. She stared at the ceiling and asked herself the question she'd been avoiding. What if they're right? What if I don't belong? The answer didn't come in words. It came in memory. The foster homes. The nights she lay awake listening to fights in the hallway. The mornings she woke up and chose to survive when no one cared if she did. She didn't belong there either, but she survived anyway. And she would hear too. Weeks bled into months. Slowly, the gym shifted. At first, the fighters only noticed her work ethic. She arrived earlier, stayed later. She ran when others rested. She trained when others joked. Then they noticed her form improving. The jabs snapping sharper, the footwork less clumsy, her combinations cleaner. One by one, the whispers changed. From ridicule to curiosity to grudging respect. But acceptance, that was still far away. It came to a head on a Thursday night when Murphy pulled her aside. Time for a real test. She frowned. What kind of test? He nodded toward the ring where a fighter was warming up. Jessica Lightning, a regional amateur champion. Smaller than Sarah, but faster, sharper, seasoned by years in the ring. You're sparring her tonight. Sarah's stomach nodded. This was Tommy, drunk on arrogance and wide open. This was a boxer who knew every angle, every trick. A fighter who wouldn't underestimate her. Coach, I'm not ready. Murphy's voice was firm. No one's ever ready, that's the point. By the time Sarah laced her gloves, Half the gym had gathered ringside, some eager to see her exposed, others curious if she'd survive. Murphy leaned close before she climbed through the ropes. She's going to make you look foolish. Faster, more experienced, more technical, but you've got two advantages. You hit harder than she expects, and you've been learning how to think. Don't forget that. The bell rang. Jessica came at her like smoke. In and out, jabs, hooks, quick combinations. Sarah swung back but hit air. It was like trying to catch shadows. Every time she thought she had Jessica cornered, the veteran slipped away and tagged her on the way out. The crowd chuckled. Sarah's face flushed. She could feel doubt creeping in, whispering that this was proof she didn't belong. But something shifted midway through the round. Instinct gave way to rhythm. The drills, the thousands of boring repetitions, began to surface. Her footwork steadied. Her jab found distance. She blocked one combination, slipped another, landed a jab that snapped Jessica's head back just enough to remind her this wasn't going to be a showcase. By round 2, Jessica's smirk faded. She was still faster, still sharper. But Sarah wasn't breaking. She was learning, adjusting, enduring. And then came the moment. Jessica threw a flawless 3-punch combo, jab, cross, left hook. Sarah slipped just enough and fired a counter right uppercut. It landed clean on the chin. The sound silenced the gym. Jessica staggered, surprised though not dropped. But the message was clear. Sarah wasn't here to play. By the end of 4 rounds, both women were breathing heavy, gloves sagging. When the bell rang, Jessica pulled out her mouthguard, jaw working slowly. "You hit like a truck," she admitted. "With proper training, you could be dangerous." For Sarah, those words meant more than the newspaper articles or the gawking crowd at the window. This was respect from another fighter who knew how hard it was to earn. Murphy helped her remove her gloves afterward. He didn't smile, not fully. "That was good," he said, "but don't kid yourself. Jessica could put you down if she wanted. You've got miles to go." Sarah nodded, sweat dripping, chest heaving. She didn't care. For the first time since stepping into Murphy's gym, she believed she might actually belong. That night, she walked home under Brooklyn's flickering streetlights, her body aching but her spirit lit like fire. She thought about every time someone had told her she couldn't, every time she'd been shoved aside. And for once, she didn't just feel like she was fighting back. She felt like she was winning. But she had no idea the real test was still ahead. Because weeks later, a phone call would change everything. A call from Murphy's office that began with 6 words. "I just got off the phone." And the name he said next would make Sarah's heart pound harder than any punch she'd ever taken. Why did her heart pound harder at the sound of a telephone than it ever had in a ring? Because Murphy never called unless it meant something serious. It was a Tuesday morning in late spring. Sarah had just finished her run along the Brooklyn waterfront, sweat cooling on her skin, lungs aching from the cold air. The phone rang as she unlaced her sneakers. Murphy's voice came through steady, but she could hear the weight in it. "I just got off the phone with Mike Torino." She froze. Mike Torino, the name was legend in the amateur boxing world. Promoter, matchmaker, the man who built the cards for the Golden Gloves. Murphy let the silence hang before he dropped the blow. "He wants to know if you're interested. Golden Gloves preliminaries, 6 weeks from now." Sarah's chest tightened. Golden Gloves, the tournament where names like Ali, Sugar Ray had all begun their climbs, and now her name was being spoken in the same breath. She swallowed. Her voice barely worked. "Who's the opponent?" "Maria, Southpaw, Bronx, records 12 wins, 2 losses. Murphy's pause was deliberate. "She's never fought anyone with your power." Sarah stopped moving. A jogger behind her almost collided into her. None of it registered. All she could hear was the question behind Murphy's words. "You ready for this?" She wanted to say no. She wanted to say she wasn't ready, that 6 weeks wasn't enough. But what came out instead was quiet, steady. "I'm ready." And from that moment, everything changed. Training became war. Murphy tore up her old schedule and rebuilt it from scratch. Road work intensified. Conditioning drills stretched her body to breaking. Most of all, he drilled her for the thing that made dangerous, the southpaw stance. Left-handed fighters were puzzles. Every angle reversed, every rhythm flipped. Orthodox fighters like Sarah spent years sparring other right-handers, but southpaws fought righties every day. It gave them an advantage, unless you learned how to solve them. Southpaws are like left-handed pitchers, Murphy explained, moving her around the ring with his coaching stick. Everything feels backward until you figure them out. Then suddenly they're not special anymore. They're just another fighter waiting to get solved. So she studied, hours of film on famous southpaws, pivoting drills until her calves screamed, sparring against left-handed partners who battered her with awkward jabs and sharp crosses until her skin turned purple. Each night she collapsed into bed with muscles trembling, but her mind sharp. For the first time, Sarah wasn't just fighting with instinct. She was learning how to outthink. Murphy's words became her mantra. Boxing is chess at light speed. Every punch you throw is a question. Every punch they throw back is their answer. The fighter who solves the conversation first wins. But the southpaw puzzle nearly broke her during one brutal sparring session. The Razor Martinez, no relation, was a former amateur champion, quick as lightning, cruelly precise. Murphy brought him in to test her. From the first bell, controlled her. His jabs sliced her guard open, his angles left her chasing shadows, his body shots bent her in half. By round 2, the gym's whispers grew louder. She's not ready. This is a mistake. She's in over her head. Sarah wanted to quit. Every part of her screamed to throw down the gloves, climb out of the ropes, and admit defeat. But between rounds, Murphy leaned in, voice low, eyes locked on hers. Stop fighting his fight. You're letting him dictate the distance, the rhythm, the pace. Walk him down. Make him fight where you want. Inside. In the phone booth. That's where your power lives. She nodded, even though doubt chewed at her insides. And then she tried. Round 3, she pressed forward, cutting off the ring. Tried circling, but she anticipated, landing a heavy right cross. His smirk vanished. By the 4th round, she'd trapped him, pounding hooks to the body until his knees bent. A left hook to the ribs dropped him to one knee. He rose, but the respect in his eyes was undeniable. You're going to be a problem, he admitted. You don't give up, and you hit too hard to ignore. For Sarah, it wasn't just validation. It was proof. She could solve the puzzle. She could belong in the ring with real fighters. But as the fight drew closer, fear returned. The night before the weigh-in, Sarah lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Maria's face, calm, confident, ruthless. She shadowboxed at 3 in the morning, her body moving on muscle memory while her mind churned. At noon, she weighed in, stood across the room, shorter than Sarah but radiating confidence like armor. Their eyes met, nodded once, a gesture of respect and challenge. Murphy noticed. She's confident, but confidence turns to complacency if you press her. We're going to use that. Hours dragged like days. Sarah couldn't eat, couldn't rest. She walked into the center that evening with her stomach empty but her heart pounding like war drums. The arena lights blazed down, sharp and merciless. The crowd buzzed, restless, waiting for blood. Murphy wrapped her hands, his weathered fingers steady. She'll try to drag you into an ugly fight. Don't swing wild. Work behind your jab. Stay disciplined. Your head wins this fight, not your heart. But when the announcer called her name and the roar of the crowd hit her, discipline nearly slipped away. The story had spread. The waitress who broke a heavyweight's jaw. The girl with no past, no pedigree, who was about to step into a ring where legends were born. Some cheered, hungry for an underdog miracle. Others jeered, ready to see her exposed. Sarah walked through the ropes anyway. And then was there, calm, sharp, ready. The referee gave final instructions. The 2 women touched gloves, leaned close enough for only Sarah to hear. Welcome to the real world, rookie. Sarah's lips curled. Thanks for the invitation. The bell rang. And all the training, all the sacrifice, all the doubt condensed into one truth. Now she had to prove it. The first 30 seconds nearly broke her. Came out blazing. Jabs snapping, crosses whipping, angles shifting so fast Sarah's eyes couldn't keep up. Every punch landed sharp. Sarah swung back, but her fists sliced empty air. Murphy's voice cut through the chaos. Breathe, find your range. But finding range against was like finding calm in a storm. Every second Sarah was hit, turned, forced back. The crowd's energy shifted. The underdog miracle wasn't happening. This was reality. Sarah was being outclassed. Until made one mistake. She got cocky. She threw a flashy four-punch combination, ending with an uppercut that left her slightly off balance. And Sarah, battered but awake, seized the moment. A short right hook dug into his ribs, forcing the air from her lungs. Grunted, staggering back. Sarah followed with a cross that grazed her chin. The crowd roared. The rookie could hurt her. The bell ended the round. Sarah stumbled to her stool, chest heaving but her eyes clear. Murphy knelt in front of her. Better, he said. You see her now, make her see you. Round 2 began with Sarah pressing forward. She cut off angles, forcing close exchanges. Her jabs snapped sharper, her body shots landed heavier. Adjusted, but her footwork slowed just enough from the punishment to her ribs. 90 seconds in, Sarah strung together the best combination of her short career. Jab, right to the body, left hook upstairs. The hook landed clean, staggered back into the ropes. The crowd erupted. The referee stepped in close but let it continue. Sarah smelled blood, but she didn't rush. She picked her shots, measured, careful. 3 more clean punches before the bell. Murphy's voice was calm between rounds. Now you're boxing. 1 more round like that and you've got it. But wasn't finished. Round 3, she came out desperate. Punches in bunches. A sharp left opened a cut on Sarah's forehead. Blood ran hot down her temple, pressed, hammering body and head. The crowd screamed. Sarah bent, staggered, nearly folded. But Murphy's voice cut through again. Counter her. She's loading up, make her pay. Sarah steadied, teeth gritted. The next time launched her favorite combo, jab, cross, hook. Sarah slipped and answered with a brutal uppercut. It landed flush. His legs buckled. The roar was deafening. Sarah pressed, cutting off the ring, landing crisp, heavy shots. Clinched, survived, fought back with pure heart, but the momentum was gone. The final 30 seconds were academic. Sarah stayed composed, disciplined, precise. The bell rang. Both women collapsed into an embrace, sweat and blood mingling. Respect, pure respect. The decision was unanimous. Sarah Martinez. As the referee raised her hand, the arena erupted. Not because she was a miracle, not because she was a gimmick. Because she belonged. Murphy climbed into the ring, pulled her close, whispered in her ear. That was the performance of a real fighter. And in that moment, Sarah realized the truth. She hadn't just fought, she fought every voice that told her she couldn't. And for the first time in her life, she'd silenced them. Why did the crowd outside Murphy's gym feel louder than the ones inside the arena? Because this time they weren't cheering. They were watching, waiting, judging. The day after her victory, Sarah couldn't walk down her block without someone recognizing her. The waitress who dropped Tank, the rookie who beat Maria, the neighborhood's miracle. Reporters called. Photographers crowded the sidewalk. Strangers stopped her at the diner, asking for autographs on napkins, receipts, even coffee cups. She wasn't just Sarah anymore. She was a story. But stories, Murphy warned, don't last long. He pulled her into his office one morning, shut the door, and slid a newspaper across the desk. The headline screamed. From waitress to warrior, Sarah Martinez shocks golden gloves. Beneath it, her photo, gloves raised, sweat shining, blood trickling from her cut. Yesterday you were nobody, Murphy said. Today you're the underdog everyone loves. Tomorrow, he tapped the paper. Tomorrow they'll be looking for a reason to call you a fraud. Sarah folded the newspaper. She wanted to argue, wanted to believe that the respect she felt in the ring, the embrace with, the roar of the crowd, that it was permanent. But deep down, she knew better. Respect in boxing isn't given. It's rented, paid for fight by fight. And the rent was already due. Training only got harder. Murphy doubled her workload. Road work before dawn, bag drills until her shoulders screamed, sparring sessions that left her bruised and gasping. But this time, the challenge wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Everywhere she turned, there was noise. Newspapers speculating about her future. Promoters offering fights she wasn't ready for. Strangers cheering her name like they owned it. One evening, after a brutal sparring session, Murphy found her staring at the gym's cracked mirror. Her reflection looked tired, hollow-eyed. She barely recognized the girl looking back. "I didn't want this," she whispered. Murphy tilted his head. "What did you want?" "To learn how to fight. That's all, not fame, not headlines, just respect." "Respect comes with weight," he said. "And right now, that weight, sitting on your shoulders. Question is, can you carry it?" Sarah didn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because she wasn't sure she could. The first sign of cracks came during sparring. She was sharper, faster, stronger, but distracted. Every time the bell rang, her mind drifted. She thought of interviews, of whispers about endorsement deals, of the cameras that sometimes peeked through the gym's windows. And when your mind drifts in the ring, punches find you. Jessica, the same fighter who'd once grudgingly respected her, caught her clean with a right hand that split her lip. "You're slipping, rookie," Jessica muttered as they clinched. Sarah wanted to argue. Instead, she spat blood into her mouthpiece and pressed forward. But Murphy saw it all. The hesitation, the weight, the difference between the girl who trained to prove herself and the woman now fighting under a spotlight she hadn't asked for. That night, Murphy pulled her aside. "Fame's a drug," he said, his voice hard. "Feels good at first, makes you think you're invincible, but it'll eat your focus alive if you let it. You want to know the difference between amateurs and pros? Amateurs fight with their hearts. Pros fight with their heads. You forget that, you'll be finished before you begin." Sarah nodded, but doubt lingered. Because even as she tried to block it out, the world kept calling. 3 weeks later, a knock came at her apartment door. A man in a suit, polished, smooth, smiling like he already owned the future. "Sarah Martinez." "Yes." He handed her a card, a television network, bigger than anything she could imagine. "We're putting together a documentary series," he said. "Women in boxing, your story's remarkable. We'd like to follow you. Cameras in training, interviews, full access." She froze. The money they were offering, enough to quit waitressing forever. Enough to pay rent without fear. Enough to let her train full-time without exhaustion from double shifts. Murphy's warning echoed in her head. Fame is a drug. But survival had always been her reality. And for the first time, survival could mean freedom. She shook the man's hand. "I'll do it, but on my terms." The announcement hit like lightning. Overnight, her name spread from Brooklyn papers to national sports networks. Sponsors called, promoters begged. Kids sent letters thanking her for proving dreams didn't have gender. For the first time, she felt something almost alien. Hope. But hope carried pressure. Because in 3 months, she'd been invited to the National Golden Gloves tournament. The stage where America's best amateurs gathered. The stage where Olympic dreams began. Murphy laid it out bluntly. "If you want to go national, the work doubles. We'll need camps, top sparring, specialized coaches. All that takes money. You've got it now, but don't forget why you're here." She nodded, but deep inside she was scared. Because the truth was simple. On paper, she didn't belong. Most women entering nationals had trained since childhood. She'd been at this less than a year. On paper, she should have been laughed out of the bracket. But on paper, she was never supposed to knock out Tommy, never supposed to beat Maria. On paper, Sarah Martinez was never supposed to exist. The 3 months before nationals nearly broke her. Murphy pushed her into levels of exhaustion she didn't know were possible. She sparred women who'd been international champions, fighters who cut her, dropped her, overwhelmed her until she adapted. until she refused to break. Specialized coaches drilled her on footwork, defense, ring strategy. Every weakness sharpened, every flaw exposed. Her body hardened, her mind sharpened. But the biggest transformation wasn't physical. It was mental. For the first time in her life, Sarah began to believe she wasn't just chasing respect anymore. She was chasing greatness. The night before Nationals, she stood in her hotel room in Las Vegas, staring at the MGM Grand Arena from the window. Neon lights painted the city, but all she saw was the ring. The same ring where legends had fought, and tomorrow she would climb through those ropes. Murphy's words replayed in her head. Don't fight for the crowd. Don't fight for the cameras. Fight for yourself. Because when the lights go out, that's all you'll have left. She clenched her fists, calloused and from endless training. She wasn't the waitress anymore, wasn't the foster kid who barely survived. Tomorrow, she was a fighter. And in the arena, she would find out if the rest of the world finally believed it too. Why did the MGM Grand Garden Arena feel bigger than the world? Because under those lights, every fighter's dream was either born or buried. Las Vegas, 3 days before her first fight at Nationals. Sarah stood in the cavernous arena, empty except for ring crews setting up the ropes, tightening the canvas, testing the lights. She tilted her head back, staring at the high ceiling, the banners, the ghosts of legends who had fought here before. This wasn't Brooklyn anymore. This wasn't about local whispers or neighborhood headlines. This was the stage. Nearly 200 of the best amateur boxers in the country. Women who had been training since they were children. Women who carried national titles, international medals, Olympic dreams. And in the middle of them, Sarah Martinez, the waitress from Brooklyn with less than a year of experience. On paper, she didn't belong. Murphy caught her staring at the rafters. Don't look up there, he said quietly. Look at the ring. That's the same size in Brooklyn as it is here. 20 feet, 4 corners, 2 fighters, everything else is noise. She nodded, but her stomach twisted. The first 2 days were a blur of weigh-ins, warm-ups, and sparring sessions with fighters from other weight classes. And Sarah learned fast, this wasn't just another level. It was another universe. These women moved like machines. Combinations so crisp they sounded rehearsed. Footwork drilled to perfection. Defense sharp enough to make her swings look wild. After one particularly brutal sparring session with a 2-time national champion, Sarah collapsed on the locker room bench, arms trembling. Sweat ran down her spine, soaking into the towel she gripped like a lifeline. Murphy crouched in front of her, calm as ever. You belong here, he said. She shook her head. They're faster, smarter, better. They've been doing this longer, that's all. You've been here 9 months and you're already making them sweat. That's the difference. She closed her eyes, tried to believe him, tried to forget the laughter in the gym when she first touched the speed bag, tried to remember what it felt like to silence a room with one perfect punch. Her first opponent was Jennifer out of Chicago, a southpaw with an international record, built like a brick wall in a smaller frame. The weigh-in stare-down was quiet, respectful, smiled slightly as the cameras snapped. Good luck, she said softly, and Sarah could tell it wasn't arrogance, it was respect. But respect wouldn't protect her when the bell rang. The night of the fight, the MGM Grand was packed. Scouts, promoters, coaches, families, and cameras everywhere. She spotted them as she wrapped her hands backstage, a red light blinking, recording everything. For a moment, panic flared. She remembered Murphy's warning, fame is a drug, don't fight for it. She closed her eyes, breath deep, and let the noise fade. By the time she walked through the tunnel into the blinding lights, her heart was steady. Murphy at her shoulder whispered the last words she needed. Don't box her fight, box yours. Round 1 was hell. Came out sharp, cutting the distance with machine-like combinations. Her jab snapped Sarah's head back. Her straight left found every opening. Judges loved her clean work, scoring point after point. Sarah chased, wild, sloppy. Every miss made her chest burn hotter. The crowd's energy shifted. The underdog was being outclassed. By the end of the round, sweat poured down her face. She sat on the stool, gasping. Murphy leaned close. "You're not going to out-tech her," he said, his voice like gravel. "So stop trying, walk through her, make her fight in the phone booth, hurt her where she can't breathe." Sarah nodded, swallowing blood from a split lip. Round 2. She pressed forward, absorbed jabs to land heavy shots to the body, took 3 light punches just to dig one hook into his ribs. The first time she landed clean, his eyes widened. Surprise. Pain. Sarah felt it, the shift. Halfway through the round, threw a 3-punch combination, and Sarah slipped the last one, answered with a brutal uppercut. It landed flush. The crowd roared as stumbled. Suddenly, Sarah wasn't chasing anymore. She was hunting. By the bell, the fight had flipped. Round 3 was war. Pressed back, desperate to reclaim control. Her punches came fast, sharp. Sarah answered with thudding shots, heavier, more punishing. Every exchange was fire against fire. The crowd was on its feet. The rookie versus the veteran, power versus precision. And when the final bell rang, both women sagged into the ropes, arms limp, eyes burning. The decision came. Unanimous, Sarah Martinez. The roar shook the arena. She'd done it again. Murphy climbed into the ring, placed a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice was calm, but his eyes gleamed. "You just announced yourself to the country." The next morning, headlines exploded. Martinez stuns again. Brooklyn fighter upsets national contender. The cameras followed her everywhere now. Networks called her the Cinderella of boxing. Kids wore makeshift Team Sarah t-shirts in the crowd. But the attention brought new pressure. She was no longer invisible. Every opponent from then on wanted to be the one to stop her rise. Her semi-final was against the reigning national champion, a woman everyone said was untouchable. Her punches were surgical, her defense airtight, her record a wall of victories. For Sarah, the fight was survival. Every round pushed her to the brink. Her ribs ached from body shots, her arms felt like lead. But every time she thought she couldn't take another step, she remembered the foster homes, the nights of survival, the voice that told her she didn't belong. And she pressed on. In the final round, she landed the punch that mattered, a hook that staggered the champion just enough to swing the momentum. The split decision came her way. And just like that, Sarah Martinez was in the finals of the National Golden Gloves. The final opponent was West Coast prodigy, a fighter who represented everything Sarah might have been if she'd started as a child. Perfect technique, relentless conditioning, ice-cold focus. From the first bell, it was clear this was the hardest fight of Sarah's life. Punches landed like clockwork. Her defense left almost no openings. Sarah swung heavy but absorbed, countered, punished. By round 2, Sarah's legs wobbled. Blood streaked down her cheek. The cameras zoomed close, broadcasting every bruise, every grimace. The crowd whispered. Maybe this was the end. Maybe the Cinderella story had finally run out. But Sarah refused. She fought like she always had, not with polish, but with grit. Every second she pressed forward. Every shot she landed thudded with power, forcing to respect her. The final round was chaos. Both women traded everything they had left. Sarah's chest burned, her arms heavy as stone. Footwork slowed, precision faltering under pressure. And in the final 30 seconds, Sarah landed her best sequence, jab, cross, hook. Clean, hard. The bell rang. Both women leaned against each other, exhausted, broken, unshaken. The judges delivered the split decision. Winner, Sarah Martinez. The crowd exploded. Cameras flashed. Her hand was raised. The waitress from Brooklyn, the girl who didn't belong, now a national champion. Back in the locker room, as the adrenaline drained, Sarah sat on the bench with her head in her hands. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not from pain, not from exhaustion. From something else. For the first time, she believed. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was winning. And the world could no longer deny it. Why did the metal around her neck feel heavier than iron? Because it wasn't just gold. It was a promise, one she wasn't sure she could keep. The nationals were barely over when the calls started. Newspapers, magazines, talk shows, promoters. For weeks, Sarah's phone didn't stop buzzing. And threaded through all of it was the same question over and over again. Will you fight in the Olympic trials? For months she avoided answering. Her body ached. Her mind was raw. She told herself she needed rest. But the truth gnawed at her in the dark when sleep wouldn't come. If she stopped now, the story ended. She'd be the waitress who shocked the world once, then faded back into the shadows. But if she went to the trials, she'd be one step from the Olympics, one step from history. Murphy didn't pressure her. He just sat in silence when she asked. Then finally, one night, over black coffee in his office, he spoke. "You don't chase history," he said. "History chases you. The question is, when it catches you, do you run or do you stand and fight?" Sarah stared at the dark liquid swirling in her cup. She already knew her answer. "I'll fight." Training camp for the trials made nationals feel like a warm-up. Murphy took her out of Brooklyn and into the mountains upstate. Cold mornings, road work through fog and frozen dirt roads, sparring in barns with heaters barely working, isolation, no cameras, no distractions, just work. But work wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the name on the bracket. Marya. Her first real opponent, the southpaw who nearly humbled her before, the fighter who whispered, "Welcome to the real world," before Sarah had even proven herself. And now, months later, was back, stronger, hungrier, furious that Sarah had stolen her spotlight. Everyone knew the rematch would decide more than a ticket to the Olympic team. It would decide legitimacy. Because some still whispered that Sarah's first win had been luck, that hadn't been at her best that night, that the rookie was a fluke. Now there would be no excuses. The first night of the trials, Sarah sat alone in the dorms, hands shaking. Fighters laughed in the hall, nerves hidden beneath bravado, but Sarah wasn't laughing. She thought about the girl who first walked into Murphy's gym, clumsy and lost. She thought about Tank's jaw breaking under her punch. She thought about Smirk the first time they touched gloves. And she thought about the one thing she never admitted to anyone, that sometimes, even now, she still felt like an intruder, like a foster kid sneaking into someone else's house. But the house was hers now, and tomorrow she'd have to defend it. The arena buzzed when the rematch was announced. Versus Martinez, the grudge match everyone wanted. Backstage, Murphy wrapped her hands, slow and deliberate. His voice was calm. "Forget the cameras, forget the crowd. This is just two fighters in a ring, same as Brooklyn, same as the gym. She wants to prove you're a fraud, you prove you're a fighter." Sarah nodded, but fear curled in her stomach. When the announcer called their names, the crowd roared. Walked first, chin high, eyes cold. Sarah followed, jaw tight, heart hammering like a drum. They touched gloves in the center, leaned close, just like the first time. "Last time was luck. Tonight I finish it." Sarah didn't answer. She just looked into her opponent's eyes and didn't look away. The bell rang. Round one was war. Came out sharper, faster, more dangerous than Sarah remembered. Her southpaw jab popped like a whip, snapping Sarah's head back again and again. Crosses followed, hard and precise. Sarah tried pressing forward, but pivoted, angles slicing, punches piling up. The judges, pencils scratched furiously. The crowd roared for. By the end of the round, Sarah's lip was split, her ribs bruised. She stumbled to the stool, chest heaving. Murphy's eyes burned into hers. "Stop chasing her. You're walking into her game. Slow down, make her miss. Then punish her for it." Sarah nodded, blood dripping down her chin. Round two. This time she didn't rush. She let throw first. And when the jab came, Sarah slipped. When the cross followed, she ducked. She absorbed some shots, but less. She countered with heavy hooks to the body. By the halfway mark, the fight shifted. Smirk faded. Her footwork slowed. Sarah pressed forward, cutting the ring, forcing exchanges. And then it happened, the punch. A short right hand that landed flush on his chin. The crowd gasped, staggered. Sarah pressed, hooks pounding ribs, crosses finding chin. The bell saved, but the momentum was gone. Round 3 was survival. Fought desperate, swinging wild, trying to reclaim control. Sarah stayed disciplined, tight, measured. Every counter landed heavy. Every body shot bent lower. The crowd knew. Everyone knew. When the final bell rang, Sarah raised her arms before the decision was even read. Unanimous, Sarah Martinez. The noise was thunder. Slumped, beaten, but not broken. For the first time, she offered no trash talk, no excuses, just a nod, respect. And for Sarah, that nod meant more than the medal waiting at the podium. The rest of the trials blurred. Sarah fought 2 more opponents, grinding, bleeding, but never breaking. By the end, her name was etched into history. Sarah Martinez, Olympic team. The waitress from Brooklyn, the foster kid no one wanted, the rookie who didn't belong. Now America's hope. But that night, as she lay alone in the dorms, medal resting on her chest, the weight returned. Because winning wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. And the next chapter wasn't just about proving herself. It was about carrying a country's dreams on her shoulders. And Sarah knew that weight was heavier than any punch. Why did the Olympic Village feel lonelier than the foster homes she grew up in? Because here, surrounded by thousands of athletes from every corner of the world, she felt the weight of something she'd never carried before: expectation. Brooklyn had expected nothing from her. The foster system had expected her to survive, nothing more. Even the gym at first expected her to fail. But now she was Sarah Martinez, the fighter who broke into the national scene in under a year. The miracle story, the underdog who carried America's hopes in her gloves. Everywhere she walked, cameras followed. Kids wanted pictures. Reporters shoved microphones in her face. Strangers wore her name on shirts. She smiled for the photos, answered the questions, played her part. But at night, when the lights went out in the village, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, hands clenched into fists beneath the thin blanket. The fear she'd buried for months returned. What if she lost? What if the dream ended here, in front of the whole world? Murphy arrived a week before the opening ceremony, as calm as ever. He found her in the gym, pounding the heavy bag long after the other fighters had left. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. She didn't look at him. "I can't." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Sarah, listen, the pressure you're feeling, every fighter here feels it. But there's only one truth in boxing. You don't fight for a country. You don't fight for the crowd. You fight for yourself, that's it." She finally turned, sweat dripping down her face. But what if that's not enough? Murphy held her gaze. It's always enough, because when that bell rings, it's just 2 people in a ring, same as it's always been. His words anchored her, just enough to breathe again. The opening ceremony was dazzling. Lights, music, nations marching in with flags. When Sarah walked out wearing Team USA's jacket, the roar was deafening. For a moment, she let herself feel it, pride. The girl who once served tables until her hands ached was now representing her country on the world stage. But pride was fleeting, because 2 days later the fights began. Her first opponent was from Kazakhstan, a wiry veteran with dozens of international bouts under her belt. From the opening bell, Sarah realized the difference. This wasn't nationals. This was Brooklyn. These women had been forged in systems where boxing wasn't a dream, but a survival plan. The Kazakh fighter's punches came fast, sharp, cutting angles Sarah had never seen before. But Sarah adapted, dug deep, walked her down with pressure, landing heavy shots that slowed her opponent's rhythm. By the final bell, Sarah's face was bruised, her ribs tender, but her hand was raised. The cameras called it gritty. Murphy called it step 1. Her second fight was even worse, a Russian southpaw with terrifying precision. Sarah ate jabs all night, her head snapping back, her balance tested with every exchange. But every time she staggered, she pressed forward. Every time she bled, she swung harder. By round 3, her eyes were swelling, but her right hand found its mark. A hook to the body, Another upstairs. The Russian bent, slowed, finally broke. When the decision came, Sarah collapsed on the stool, unable to lift her arms. Murphy crouched beside her, eyes fierce. "You just beat one of the best in the world," he said, "and you're not even close to finished." The semi-final was against an Italian phenom. Younger, faster, cleaner. The crowd loved her, chanting her name in waves. For Sarah, it was the loneliest fight she'd ever had. Every time she moved, boos rained down. Every punch she landed felt swallowed by the noise. But somewhere between the second and third round, Sarah stopped hearing them, stopped caring. She fought in silence, in the rhythm of her own breath, in the echo of Murphy's words in her corner. And when she landed the final combination, a stiff jab followed by a right cross, the Italian staggered. The judges had no choice. Sarah advanced. The underdog, the nobody, now an Olympic finalist. The night before the gold medal bout, Sarah couldn't sleep. The weight on her chest was crushing. She sat on the balcony of her tiny room, staring at the lights of Paris, the Olympic flame burning in the distance. Murphy joined her quietly, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He set one down beside her. "Tomorrow's the big one," he said. She didn't answer. "You scared?" She nodded, terrified. He sipped his coffee. "Good, fear keeps you honest, just don't let it own you." She stared at the flame in the distance. "What if I lose?" Murphy leaned back. "Then you lose, and you'll still be the girl who fought her way from nothing to the Olympics. You'll still be the fighter who never quit, and maybe that's enough." But Sarah wasn't sure it was. The final was against Ling, the reigning world champion from China. Undefeated, cold, ruthless, a woman who hadn't lost a fight in years. The arena was electric, cameras flashing, the world watching. When the bell rang, Sarah's fear evaporated. All that remained was instinct. Ling was every bit as good as promised. Sharp, surgical, merciless. Her punches landed like blades, cutting Sarah's defense apart. By the end of round 1, Sarah's nose was bleeding, her legs wobbling. Murphy's voice cut through. "She's not invincible. Make her miss. Force her into deep water. She's never been there before." Round 2, Sarah dug in, slipped just enough, landed to the body, forced back inch by inch. The crowd roared as Sarah connected with a right hand that stunned the champion. For the first time, eyes widened. Sarah pressed. Pain radiated through every nerve in her body, but she refused to stop. Round 3 was chaos. Both women traded everything they had. Sarah's face was a mask of blood and sweat. His body sagged from the punishment to her ribs. Neither would break. The final bell rang. Both women collapsed into their corners. The arena held its breath. The decision was split, one judge one for Sarah. The final card read, 29-28, Sarah Martinez. The arena erupted. The underdog, the waitress, the girl no one wanted. Now, an Olympic gold medalist. On the podium, as the anthem played, Sarah's tears blurred the flag rising above her. The medal hung heavy around her neck, heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Because it wasn't just hers. It belonged to every girl who'd been told she didn't belong. Every fighter who'd been laughed at. Every survivor who refused to quit. Sarah Martinez had proven them all wrong. But even as the anthem ended, even as the cameras flashed, she knew something deep and unshakable. The fight was never really about medals. It was about dignity. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did silence feel louder than applause? Because after the Olympics, after the anthem, after the confetti and the lights, Sarah came home to a room that was empty. Brooklyn hadn't changed. The same cracked sidewalks, the same corner stores, the same gym with its flickering neon sign, but Sarah had changed. Everywhere she walked, people recognized her now. Children pointed. Strangers asked for pictures. The news called her the Cinderella champion. Promoters called her the future. But when the doors closed at night, the noise vanished. And what remained was the ache, the bruises that wouldn't fade, the ribs that stung when she breathed too deep, The whispers in her head that still asked the same question they always had. Do you really belong? Murphy saw it before anyone else. You're restless, he said one evening, watching her pound the heavy bag long after the others had left. Sarah didn't stop swinging. I'm supposed to feel proud, happy, but all I feel is empty. Murphy folded his arms. That's the truth about glory. It fills the arena but never the soul. You fought for something bigger than yourself. Now you've got to figure out who you're fighting for next. Her fist slowed. She pressed her forehead against the bag, sweat dripping. I don't know who that is. Then find out. Just don't lose yourself trying to be what everyone else wants you to be. The offers poured in. Professional contracts, endorsements, appearances, millions on the table. She signed some, turned down others. Money gave her freedom, but not peace. Every ring she stepped into felt heavier now. Every fight wasn't just about winning, it was about defending a reputation. And reputations, she learned, weigh more than gold. Months passed, the bruises healed, but new scars formed. In her first professional bout, she dominated. The crowd roared, headlines screamed again. Olympic gold medalist dazzles in pro debut. But in her second fight, she struggled. Her opponent wasn't intimidated, wasn't impressed by the medal or the hype. Sarah won by decision, but it was ugly, and the whispers returned. Maybe she peaked at the Olympics. Maybe she's not built for the pro game. The same voices she'd silenced years ago were back. Different mouths, same doubt. And Sarah realized something: the fight would never end. Not with medals, not with belts, not with fame. Because the fight was never outside, it was inside. One night, unable to sleep, she walked through Brooklyn alone. Past the diner she once worked in. Past the apartment buildings where she'd once been another forgotten foster kid. Past the gym where it all began. She stopped at the window. The same cracked mirrors, the same heavy bags, a handful of kids training, laughing, sweating. One girl caught her eye, 12, maybe 13, skinny, unsure, gloves too big for her hands. Sarah watched as the girl fumbled with the jump rope, tripping again and again. The older boys laughed. She flushed red, but tried again. And Sarah saw herself. Without thinking, she pushed the door open. The room fell quiet as the Olympic champion walked in. But Sarah didn't look at them. She walked straight to the girl. You're holding the rope wrong, Sarah said softly. She knelt, adjusted the girl's grip. Here, try it now. The girl tried again. Better, not perfect, but better. Sarah smiled. That's it, don't stop. They'll laugh until the day you make them stop. The girl's eyes lit up, the same fire Sarah once felt. And in that moment, Sarah understood. The fight was no longer about herself. It was about every girl like her, every forgotten kid, every voice told they didn't belong. Weeks later, Sarah started showing up more. Not for interviews, not for cameras, for the kids, teaching, guiding, reminding them that strength isn't in medals or headlines, but in the refusal to quit. Murphy watched from the corner, a rare smile tugging at his lips. You finally figured it out, he said one evening. Sarah looked up. Figured what out? What you were really fighting for. She glanced at the kids sparring in the ring. Their laughter, their stubbornness, their raw hope. And she nodded. Years later, her name would hang in halls of fame. Her fights replayed on screens. Her story told as legend. But Sarah knew the truth. The real victories weren't in the arenas. They weren't in the medals or the belts. They were in the gym, in the eyes of the kids who learned not to quit, in the silence after the crowd's roar faded, in the dignity of standing tall when the world said you couldn't. And when the final chapter of her story was written, it didn't end with explosions or medals or the echo of a referee's call. It ended with a quiet truth. That sometimes, the strongest punch isn't the one that breaks jaws. It's the one that breaks doubt. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts,